China's President Xi Jinping has been holding talks with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Beijing this morning. You're looking at fresh footage. Putin is hailing what he is calling unprecedented ties between the two countries. Their meeting comes as leaders from around the world gather in the Chinese capital ahead of a massive military parade tomorrow, marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War. CBS News foreign correspondent Anna Corrin is following all of these developments for us from Beijing.
Behind me on Chong'an Avenue, China will host its biggest ever military parade to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Rehearsals have been going on here in Beijing for weeks. The city is under tight security, and very shortly we will have to vacate the CBS office as all buildings along the parade route will be locked down. For Chinese leader Xi Jinping, this will be a moment of glory. As Commander-in-Chief of the world's largest armed forces, he will watch over as tens of thousands of troops march towards Tiananmen Square, showcasing the country's newest military hardware. Among the guests attending, Russia's President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. It will be the first time Kim will appear together with Xi and Putin in what is seen as a direct challenge to the US-led world order. Well, that message was also conveyed over the weekend at the Regional Security Summit in Tianjin, northern China, where Xi hosted more than 20 world leaders, including Putin and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. On Monday, Xi, Putin and Modi were shown together smiling and laughing, a deliberate public display of warmth and camaraderie. Well, just last week, the United States imposed 50% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. At this week's events, Xi is not just asserting China as a stable and reliable partner, it is also showing off the country's alliances and its might and power, a message intended solely for the US. Back to you.
All right, Anna, thank you for that. And for more context, let's jump to London now with CBS News foreign correspondent Remi Inocencio, who you all should know is our former China correspondent based in Beijing for a while. Good morning, Remi. We heard Anna there mention China showing off its alliances. So what should we all make of this as we see a massive counterbalance to the power of the US?
Absolutely. It looks like there is a shift or an attempted shift from the West to the East, Errol. And we are looking at the optics right now of what appear, at least, to be deepening Sino-Russian ties. And then if you expand that out, the optics of closer ties among authoritarian, or maybe we could say strongman regimes from Asia, that includes North Korea and to some degree India, through to Central Asian countries vis-a-vis the Shanghai Cooperative Organization council meeting that happened over the weekend, and then onwards to Iran, the president there as well. But at the core of this, the heart of this, is Beijing and Moscow. The leaders of both countries use the word friend to describe each other, but I got to remind that these countries in the Cold War of the 1960s were in fact bitter enemies. But on Monday, yesterday, Russian President Putin called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dear friend, and Xi called Putin an old friend. And then Putin said that bilateral ties are now unprecedentedly high. Whether they are or not, that is another question, because I also have to remind that ties between Beijing and Moscow have always been, I want to say, more functional, or because one needed the other, and less, should we say, cultural or maybe even racial or ethnic, unlike, say, some might try to draw parallels with the U.S. and Western Europe. It's often been more in the style of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this case, their shared enemy is Washington.
And Remi, let's press that topic a bit more. You've got the words, the smiles and the handshakes, but what deliverables have come out of these meetings or may come out?
Sure. Something that both Russia and China need, money and energy. Energy by way of Russian energy in the form of natural gas that could or has been agreed to flow to China. This is in both new infrastructure as well as more gas itself. Those were agreed to earlier today. That's coming from the head of Russia's state-owned Gazprom to build a new gas pipeline from northwest Siberia that would then transit through the country of Mongolia and its capital of Ulaanbaatar and then end someplace in China. This is called the Power of Siberia 2, PS2. It would stretch more than 1,500 miles. It would be one of the biggest gas pipelines in the world in terms of capacity. This comes as Europe, as we know, has slashed its imports of Russian gas since 2021 because of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. They used to import roughly half of their gas needs. Now that's down to less than 20%. So these new Chinese purchases, that could help offset at least some of the losses and then give Russia a badly needed infusion of funds. Aside from that, we should keep an eye on what happens with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. We saw his train arrive in Beijing in the last few hours, his famed armored train there. The last time he was in Beijing was 6 years ago. The questions that are on my mind, Errol, will he commit more troops to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Will Beijing or Moscow pledge more support for Pyongyang in terms of its military or maybe even its aspiration to be a nuclear state?
Yeah, a lot happening in that part of the world. Rami is across it all. Thank you, Rami. Russian President Putin and India's Prime Minister Modi showing solidarity at the annual Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. China's President Xi is also joining the huddle. The show of force comes as tensions sharpen between all three countries and the U.S. over tariffs. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Kevin Sheridan, Republican strategist and former RNC spokesperson, and Michael LaRosa, partner at the government relations firm Ballard Partners and the former press secretary for First Lady Jill Biden. A warm welcome to you both. So for our viewers at home, the person who skews left is on the right and the person who skews right is on the left. Okay, great to have you both with us. Kevin, let's start with you. I mentioned off the top that you had President Putin and India's Prime Minister Modi. They were actually holding hands, a show of solidarity today. How big is this a snub to President Trump, who has made an effort to bring India away from its oil and trade relationship with Russia?
Yeah, it remains to be seen. He also put out a statement this weekend, really directed at India. That's an extremely important relationship where he thinks that too much of our trade imbalance is way off with that country. They import to us. We can't import to them. Remains to be seen what that Russia relationship with India looks like. They do give them all their oil. Their oil and gas goes from Russia to India. If Trump can break that up a little bit and get some of our LNG or our oil to them, that would be a big win. But yeah, this is high stakes international negotiations. And look, Putin knows what he's doing. And right. The optics are clear that he wants to send a shot across the bow that he's involved in India as well.
And Michael, what do you make of this? What does it say about the president's efforts to change things internationally?
Well, I think this is one of those circumstances where his style, his brash and aggressive style of diplomacy has not yielded the desired diplomatic outcomes that he hoped for. With the tariffs, by slapping 50% tariffs on India, insulting them, and really spewing some tough talk, at least on social media, it's really driven them into the arms of sort of the Russians and the Chinese right now. And Modi seems to be trying to get under Trump's skin with his own sort of grand pageantry of visuals and images over there with Putin, Xi, and sort of like the gang's all there, right?
Right. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un has arrived in Beijing as China's President Xi Jinping has been holding talks with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Putin hailed what he calls unprecedented ties between the two countries. Their meetings come as leaders gather in the Chinese capital ahead of a massive military parade marking 80 years since the end of the Second War. That happens tomorrow. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Rami Inocencio. He's joining us from our London bureau. So, massive military parade expected tomorrow, Rami. What are we expected to see? And what are they trying to send as an image by having all of them in Beijing? What are the Chinese hoping to send to the rest of the world?
Sure. The message there by all of them, we're talking about officially presidents, prime ministers of countries from across Asia through to Central Asia. But, I got to say, notably, for critics at least, several of these leaders are called strongmen, and they're called dictators. For example, you just mentioned North Korean leader Kim Jong Un just arrived in Beijing in his favorite, his armored train. There you see him there, a still from state-run Korean media smiling there. You can think of it like Air Force One, but on rails. That is how he likes to travel for fear of being shot out of the sky. But the last time he was in Beijing, 6 years ago, notable considering China is North Korea's biggest ally. We've also got Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian in Beijing. But along with Xi and Putin, got to look at these four together. This quartet is coming to be known, at least in some critical circles, Vlad, as the axis of upheaval, sort of a play on the axis of evil from some Hollywood movies, let's say. There's also Myanmar's military chief and India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The optics of what we're seeing on the screen, what we will see on the screen as well tomorrow with these leaders, can definitely push this kind of narrative of China trying to push it as this new, well, a resurgent, let's say, counterweight to American power, along with bringing the so-called global South. President Xi in the past couple of days has been saying that they got to push back against hegemony. And when you hear that word, that is a code word for Washington, for the U.S. So tomorrow we expect to see China's force projection. We've already seen preps over the past days and weeks there. I expect to see new warplanes, defense systems, new hypersonics, possibly a missile called a Guam killer, because that's supposed to be able to hit Guam and the U.S. Pacific base there.
All right. Lots of good picture moments, obviously, for the Chinese leader. But other than that, is there anything substantial that's expected to come out of this meeting that could have ramifications for the United States or the West?
Right. Well, one thing has already come out by way of energy, Russian energy in the form of natural gas to China. And this is in infrastructure along with more gas itself. These were agreed earlier today. That's coming from the head of Russia's Gazprom, that is the state-owned gas company there, to build this new gas pipeline from northwestern Siberia that would then transit through the country of Mongolia and its capital, Ulaanbaatar, and then end up someplace in China. This is called the Power of Siberia 2. And basically, this is going to be massive. It would stretch more than 1,500 miles. Could be one of the biggest gas pipelines in the world in terms of capacity, almost the level of Nord Stream 1, which connects Russia and Germany. And got to remind people, this comes as Europe, we know, has slashed its imports of Russian gas since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. So those new Chinese purchases will help offset at least some of the losses that it's seen. But aside from that, we should keep an eye on what happens with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. The question on my mind, will he commit more troops to Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Also, if India's Modi will get even closer to Putin and Xi after Donald Trump threw 50% tariffs on Indian exports. So we got another day to go to see what else might come out of this.
Yep. Really, really good questions and excellent reporting and analysis. Ramy, thank you very much.